My name is Sierra Jaguar. I'm 9 years old and I'm a Baha'i.
Sierra, what is a Baha'i?
A Baha'i is someone who is a follower of the Baha'i faith and Baha'u'llah.
Who is Baha'u'llah?
Baha'u'llah is a prophet, and Baha'is, which are my religion, believe in progressive revelation, which means sort of we believe in Jesus and Muhammad and all the other prophets, basically.
Okay. And what are some of the things based on his teachings that Baha'is believe in?
We believe in unity. We believe in all the people of the world are just one race. That skin color doesn't matter, we're against prejudice.
What does the Baha'i faith say about women?
They say that women are as equal as man, and there's this quote about a dove, that if one wing is broken, then the dove cannot fly. It's like one side is man, one side is woman, and if women are not treated equally, then the dove of peace cannot fly.
My name is Bita Hadarian. I'm Iranian American Baha'i. I'm a filmmaker living in Austin, Texas, and my family was persecuted and put in prison in Iran in the early 80s because they were Baha'is, and they came to the States as refugees. They finally escaped the country and came in as refugees in the early 80s. I think the big challenge for the Baha'is in Iran is that they aren't given their basic human rights. They're not allowed to attend university. They're not allowed to participate in many parts of society because of their religion. And I think, the big reason why the Baha'is are pointed out is, firstly, one, because they're the largest religious minority in Iran. A lot of the other religious minorities are also persecuted, but the Baha'is are not recognized as a real religion by the Iranian government because they weren't in the books before Islam. So, they recognize Christianity and Judaism as legitimate religions. I mean, those religions are also persecuted, but the Baha'is specifically came after Islam and spoke about the Prophet Baha'u'llah, as the return of all the prophets of the past. So the Iranian government is, very anti the Baha'is because they're saying someone has come after Muhammad. And part of Muslim belief is that Muhammad is the last prophet. He is the seal of a prophet. So for another religion to come and say that there's someone who came after him is very problematic. I think their biggest fear is that the Baha'i faith is growing and that they can't be intimidated. I think that they are very fearful that, they put these people in prison, they kill these people, they burn their homes, they take away their property, and yet they still will not recant their faith, and they'll still try and educate their children. They will still rebel in a peaceful way because, basically, I think that's what has been so problematic for the government, is that we should have been able to coerce these people through fear to stop believing what they believe and stop practicing their faith, and they haven't been able to do that, and that is just very frustrating. And why can't they stop it? And I think that is very, very frustrating for them, especially why can't we stop it, and also why is it still growing, when we're doing all these things to stop it.
My name is Merdad Bashiri, and I'm originally from Iran. I came to the United States in August of 1985 as a refugee. I had to basically escape Iran back in 1983, and it took me about a year and a half to arrive in the United States. Professionally, I am an accountant, and I have been living in Austin for the past 15 years. The teachings of the Baha'i faith altogether have caused severe basically reaction from Muslim clerics in Iran. Perhaps I would say that almost 18 or 19,000 Babis and Baha'is were killed throughout the history of the faith in Iran. And there were different phases to these persecutions, starting with basically mobs killing Babis or Baha'is, and then a more formal one that we witness in recent years after the Iranian Revolution of 1979. And the scope of persecutions go different dimensions. Of course, it started with arresting prominent members of the community, then arresting individuals who were known for their knowledge and scholarship of the Baha'i faith, members of the institutions which basically administer the affairs of the community. And this was followed by perhaps execution of some of these individuals. At one point, there was over 750 Baha'is imprisoned. But overall Baha'is killed is about 230 Baha'is killed. Of course, my father, I don't know if you know that, my father was among them. He was executed in November of 1984. There are no clergies in the Baha'i faith, and basically these 9-member council that could be anybody, and they are elected in the community. Basically they take care of the affairs of that community. Then at the national level, each country, Baha'is of each country elect a 9-member council to basically take care of the affairs of that country. And these institutions are called spiritual assemblies. You have local spiritual assemblies and national spiritual assemblies. And my father was a member of one of these national spiritual assemblies in Iran, and he was actually kidnapped in basically, I believe, June of 1983. And following being in prison for 15 months and severely tortured. And we have evidence of his torture. He was executed in November of 1984. I was in Iran when my father was kidnapped. I vividly remember the day that the members of Revolutionary Guards they came to our house and they searched our house early hours of morning. That's perhaps a separate story, but I was back then I was 18, and it was early morning that 9 members of the Revolutionary Guard basically searched our house and took all of basically our books and a lot of personal belongings.
And so was that happening to a lot of people that you knew, where they were coming in and searching their house?
Yes, a lot of I personally knew. As I said, there were other members of this National Spiritual Assembly that they were persecuted too, and I know their families, and they went through the same thing. And even like regular Baha'is who were not really just members of the faith. And they were arrested, and a lot of them, a number of them were killed, and also their belongings were confiscated by the government.
And so there were 9 members of the spiritual assembly?
Yes.
And were they all imprisoned?
Just to clarify, the first spiritual assembly was basically, I believe, arrested in 1980. Mm-hmm. Then a second spiritual assembly, National Spiritual Assembly, was elected, and they were arrested in, I believe, 1982 or 1983, and they were killed. Both previous members of this National Spiritual Assemblies were killed, and the third one, which my father was a member, out of 9 members, perhaps 8 or 7 have already been killed. Back then, when my father was arrested, his trial was a religious trial, and then you have this religious judge who basically sits there, and a lot of times they have already made their decisions, and a lot of times the prosecutor and the religious judge is the same person, or they are all members of the same team. And we have documents. I do have actually copies of documents of his basically the court documents that you can easily see. Just one piece of paper, basically he's condemned to death. One of his charges was because he asked other Baha'is to go to the government and ask for assistance and justice. This was one of his basically charges, and there are like 4 or 5 other charges. He taught the Baha'i faith, to others. This was another charge for his execution. So you see that there are very extremely the judicial system is really corrupt. And keep in mind, the torture was an extreme element of this whole process. My father was really severely tortured. We know that he was lashed over 1,000 times, and this was with cables, with wire cables, and there are so many evidence of torture that we have.
Was that punishment, or were they trying to get him to renounce his faith?
Exactly. The main thing is because he was member of this National Spiritual Assembly and perhaps a well-known person in the Baha'i community. So if they could get him to renounce his faith and bring him on national TV and use him as a person that, look, for the entire Iranian community and the Baha'i community, that look, one of your members of the National Spiritual Assemblies has basically recounted his faith, and here is what he says. And of course, he did not, and basically he ended up being killed. And this is the story with all 230 other Baha'is who were killed.
Hi, my name is Nika Khanjani, and I am a filmmaker living right now in Montreal, Canada. I was born in Iran, and my family and I moved from Iran in 1979 to Texas. We moved from Iran because of the Islamic Revolution, and primarily because my family is Baha'i. My parents decided to leave because they were afraid that by staying I wouldn't have access to higher education, and they were right. From the early 80s, the Baha'i students and Baha'i professors and administrators were all expelled from universities. And this is one of the many civil rights that were denied to the Baha'i community. So the Baha'i community responded in a very creative and nonviolent way. So they started and organized a decentralized and totally volunteer-run university where students could travel to Tehran and study every month from their respective cities. I spent 2 years in Iran from 2002 to 2004 teaching English literature, writing, and conversation to students. And my classes were indicative of a lot of the classes in that they were held in people's living rooms. A lot of the classes were held in people's private living rooms, in basements, places where students could gather safely and study with their textbooks on their laps, and the instructor using a whiteboard to teach the lesson. This has been going on for almost 30 years. For many years, this was known as the Underground University, and it's because they had to operate under the radar. Although the government knew about all of their operations from the very beginning, because they were under constant surveillance and were raided on many occasions, and the soldiers or the police would take books and computers and lab equipment and and very important photocopy machines, because that's how the textbooks were made and distributed to the students. The students were often arrested and threatened with prison time if they didn't sign some promissory note that they wouldn't continue doing this illegal activity. In fact, it wasn't at all illegal, especially because Iran had signed the United Nations Charter for Human Rights that granted the right to higher education to all people, regardless of their race, sex, creed, religion, or class. And this was something that the Iranian government was blatantly denying the Baha'i community, and has been for almost 30 years. What I would say now is that things are getting much worse for the Baha'is. In the last few years, the persecution has increased, the pressure has gotten worse. They've been attacking school children, all kinds of people who have absolutely nothing but the best intentions for their country and their fellow countrymen. In May, it will be 1 year that 7 of the administrators of the Baha'i community in Iran have been detained in prison under false charges of espionage. One of those 7 is my uncle, who I lived with for the 2 years that I was in Iran. He's now 75 or 76 years old.
Hello, my name is Soroush Azadi. I am an optometrist in Austin, Texas. I have been living in the United States since I was 11. I was born in Iran though, and I left when I was 9. We escaped to Pakistan for a couple of years and lived there as refugees before we arrived in the United States. Currently in Iran, the members of the legislative body, or the spiritual assembly of the Baha'is of Iran, have been jailed since last November, and they have not had access to their lawyer, their family members, and they have had difficulty, the Baha'is of Iran have had difficulty getting from the government of Iran any proof for what they are being charged for. They claim, the Islamic Republic claims, that we have been helping Israel with selling secrets to Israel, and also for spreading propaganda against the Islamic regime. In today's day and age, all we can do to fight what's going on in Iran is to raise awareness throughout the international community. Therefore, here in the United States, both in the House of Representatives and in the Senate, there are separate resolutions condemning the government of Iran for jailing the members of the Baha'i community, the legislative body of the Baha'i community in Iran, and also trying to get the support of the President and the Secretary of State.
By the U.S. government responding to the persecution of the Baha'is in Iran, and by other international governments putting pressure on Iran to let the Baha'is out, do you hope that that international pressure will free the Baha'is? And do you think that what the international community has done so far has helped in any way?
Yes. The reason for that is when they were first arrested, and then multiple incidents since. For example, in February, the Revolutionary Court of Iran mentioned that within 2 weeks these Baha'is will be having a trial. Well, they've had no trial since. And the main reason for that, we believe, is because so many have known about it. Most countries and most regimes who are persecuting a certain minority will try to do it in hidden ways, and if more of the world, or more of the countries, or more people know about it, then it puts increased pressure on them, because no one wants to break humanitarian international law. So that's what we're trying to do by raising awareness. It has had an effect, and also it also helps that their lawyer, a Nobel laureate herself, who has a lot of publicity following her, has caught the eye of the international communities. So it does help for the international community to know about it.